All around us, we are surrounded by wonder if we venture out and see it. In my last ministry, I had occasion to commute back and forth across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri to southern Illinois. I remember one night driving home to St. Louis after a late board meeting as a thunderstorm danced at the edges of the sky around me. The sky is big out there. The geography is flat, and the sky stretches forever. The flashes lit the horizon, throwing the massive canopy of clouds into inky black relief. Just across the bridge into Missouri, I pulled over in my car to sit and watch the show. No creative genius employed at the Dream Factory could produce such a magnificent display. When we stay inside and do not venture out, the stormy, threatening energy of the universe remains a part of life we shall not know. And yet wonder can have a darker side. Rarely are things as idyllic as we'd like to imagine them to be. Thunderstorms that light up the night sky can also blow down trees and damage homes. Fields of flowers carry pollen and bugs and all manner of things to irritate humans, things that make us sneeze or itch or break out in a rash. A handful of sand is an amazing thing to examine under a glass, but even a few grains of that same sand in your sandwich can significantly diminish the joy in your picnic. In our modern world of high technology, 24/7 news cycles, and all the answers to life's questions accessible in the smartphone in our pocket, our instinct is often to seek simplicity, as Thoreau did, and head into the woods to live simply and view the wonders of the world through lenses unstained by modern contrivances. Many of us know well and treasure those lines from Henry David Thoreau's Walden. "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately," he writes, "to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, and, if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world. Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience, and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion." Oh, we treasure those words. Many of us know them by heart and can recite them with wistful longing for a simpler, Spartan-like lifestyle. And yet, there are some things that we ought to know about Thoreau and his life when he wrote those lines. Henry David Thoreau was an overeducated, underemployed, freeloading friend of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Unable to find work to his liking, he made a subsistence living by doing odd jobs and tutoring the Emerson children in what later became the early suburbs outside of Boston. He retreated eventually to the cabin he built for himself at the edge of Walden Pond, but his life was not nearly as Spartan as his essays describe. He was a regular visitor at the Emersons' Sunday dinner table, where he ate voraciously and took back provisions to his cabin each week, including pie. His mother did his laundry, so that he could live simply and write essays in the woods. It is one of my great joys to expose feet of clay. The rest of Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience and his time at Walden carry a tone of haughty superiority, as he judged harshly those who chose to live in comfortable homes with roofs, purchase goods at the local market, and participate in civil society. His affected asceticism rendered him a superior moral being to those others, he claimed. For all his descriptions of appreciating the simple wonders of nature and humble living, he was really kind of a pompous jerk. And yet, Thoreau's descriptions of the natural world inspired generations of transcendentalists and changed the shape of theology in America. Where I grew up in New England, nature's most powerful brute efforts were often on display as a result of late summer hurricanes that travel up the eastern seaboard, or their nastier winter cousins, the nor'easter. When I lived in Bar Harbor, Maine for several years, I experienced the brutal wonder that is a nor'easter headed toward the Canadian Maritimes from the vantage point of a coastal island. When the wind comes screaming in off Frenchman's Bay, laden with snow and sleet and freezing rain, and the ice pellets hit your face and sting, and the snow drives against the windows of the house with a ting-ting noise as it hits the cold, brittle glass, that is a natural wonder best observed from indoors. Sometimes, at the height of a storm, driven more by wonder than common sense, I would drive my old truck down to a place called Seawall and watch the ocean pound against a rocky shore. Not all oceanfront property is sandy beach. In Maine, there are almost 3,500 miles of coastland, and only 13 of those miles are sand. The rest are made of rocks of various sizes and stubbornness. As the wind churns up the waves ahead of the driving snow, the surf turns white and then a greenish-white froth that looks like the water in a washing machine. The waves crash together and fall apart, creating giant peaks of spray and deep troughs of gray-green from which no air-breathing thing could emerge alive. Ducks and gulls and waterfowl, days earlier retreated to the sheltered waters of inland bays and rivers, tucked safely into the bushes along the shore until the storm would abate. I remember one storm when I drove along the Park Loop Road in Acadia National Park. The road from Thunder Hole to Otter Point is high above the normal high tide mark, some 60 or 70 feet up the rough pink granite cliff, and back from the edge by that distance again. The ocean that day was higher than I've ever seen it. It may have been pushed up by a full moon, I don't remember. But when I got there, I rolled down the window of my truck to smell the salt air, and from 60 yards back, I got hit in the face with a blast of surf spray. The next day, the inside of the passenger window of my truck was streaked with salt. There is something about nature that reduces us to a more humble state than we often care to inhabit. We like to think that we are in charge of things, important things. But when a storm hits and the wind blows, when the waters rise, we gain a renewed clarity about the true extent of our power or lack of it in this world. If on a cloudy day, with grayness infusing all, the rain dancing rivers in the grass, we stay inside and do not venture out, the stormy, threatening energy of the universe remains a part of life we shall not know. Now, I am, by nature and training, a professional cynic. Before I ever considered ministry a calling, I worked as a newspaper reporter and as a political hack. As a reporter, I covered police reports and court cases and political races and small-town politics, where I saw some of the meanest and most petty behavior I have ever seen from adults who were not related to one another by blood or marriage. As a political activist, I made phone calls and got death threats, fought against groups designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups, got prayed at and spit upon by people who declared themselves to be upright Christians. At one point in my younger years, I worked as a case aide for Maine's Bureau of Child Protective Services, where I supervised visits between foster children and their families of origin. The families that had treated the children in such a way that the state of Maine determined that for the children to survive, they needed to be removed from the home. So it was my job to monitor those visits so that the parents did not pressure the children not to testify in court, or so that they would not mistreat their children during their once-a-week visit. I have seen some of the very worst that people can be to one another. I know the depths of cruelty people will visit upon their closest family members. I have seen hate in the eyes of parents and anguish on the faces of children. And yet, I know that we live in a beautiful world. Wonder remains. Humans are capable of appreciating wonder as we are capable of wondrous behavior ourselves. The generosity of the human spirit, our capacity for love, our passion for justice, our mission to create beauty and to make our world a better place, are all as magnificent displays of grace worthy of wonder and awe as a drop of dew on a blade of grass or a loon calling in the evening on an inland lake. The earth retains its beauty despite our best efforts, acting as a complex living organism, perhaps with an infestation of parasites. I believe at some point the earth will slough off its human occupants in one way or another, or we will do it for the earth, and the creation process will start anew. There is so much wonder around us if we go outside and see it and feel it. The natural world contains wonders beyond the human imagination, macro and micro included. I remember the first time I saw the aurora borealis, the northern lights. I was in Lincoln, Maine, which is up around the 45th parallel, halfway between the North Pole and the equator. I remember going outside in the late August darkness, looking up at the sky and seeing these shimmering waves of color. At the time, I was working at a radio station, so I went inside to put on a very long song, long record, remember records? And then came back out, got a beach blanket from the back of my car, and I spread it out on the driveway of this little radio station in the middle of nowhere and laid on my back and looked up at the stars and watched the borealis shimmer and flex in rainbow hues through the night. If on a starlit night with the moon brightly shimmering, we stay inside and do not venture out, the evening universe remains a part of life we shall not know. The earth and its wonders, like everything else, is not without its hazards and pain. Plants and animals that are beautiful can poison us in a variety of ways. There are arguments to be made about the value of vegetable-based diets versus those that include meat, and the carbon footprint and inherent violence and exploitation of undocumented workers that comes with the production of all kinds of food. And for Maine, lobster is delicious, but can it be cooked in a humane fashion? Everything has a good side and a bad side. And the reality we deal with is a mixture of the two. When it comes to humans, I think sometimes we are too quick to dismiss an author when we learn that they have feet of clay. Thoreau was kind of a jerk, but his observations of the natural world and his transcendent experiences were not rendered invalid because of his character flaws. None of us is defined entirely by the best or worst thing we've ever done, thank God. We are complex, complicated people. We have inherent worth and dignity, yes, and we are imperfect enough that we need to be reminded sometimes that we have inherent worth and dignity. And sometimes we need to be reminded that others have inherent worth and dignity as well. That even the meanest among us is worthy of the love of the divine, and that all are deserving of mercy and grace. And it is there in the roots and foundations of our universalist heritage, that is where I find the wonder that can overpower my skepticism. This unlikely, unruly, perhaps ill-advised, bone-deep belief, this knowledge that all people have some good in them, no matter what. For me, I find wonder in the natural world and in the resiliency of the human spirit and its capacity for grace. Our world is a complex place, and it is filled with complex humans. To engage in wonder in such a world is a spiritual practice of its own. It takes intention, patience, and a willingness to offer grace and forgiveness to this imperfect world and to each other and to ourselves. If we stay inside ourselves and do not venture out, then the fullness of the universe shall be unknown to us, and our locked hearts shall never feel the rush of worship. May we remember to venture out today and tomorrow and every day. May it be so. Amen.